What experience of yours is so crazy, you don't tell people about it because they wouldn't believe you? When I was younger, I worked at a popular theme park in the UK as a ride assistant. One of the rides I worked on was the river rapids. Two young Scouse lads who had obviously been drinking got on, and it was clear they were going to be a pain in the arse. As their raft came towards the end, they both were running around the outsides of it. The raft hits the wall and they both fell in. This is near the lift section of the ride, which if they'd been snagged would have torn them up badly. I ran down and God knows how, managed to pull them both out. They were both swiftly escorted to the medical center and I'm assuming off park. The same day, after I finished work, I went to go and see a friend for a few hours, and on my way home I follow a car that is all over the place. The car hits a curb and flips onto its roof. I stop my car, run across, yank the doors open and pull both of the occupants out. Same two lads I'd pulled out of the water at work earlier in the day. You clearly interrupted some Final Destination stuff right there. 4 people died on a similar sounding ride in Australia a few years ago. The description of their injuries from the conveyor belt was haunting. These 2 kids were lucky you were there. I hope those 2 lads had generous loved ones. This has got to be Gulliver's World, hasn't it? Or maybe Alton Towers. My friend and I once missed the last train home after a gig and wandered around a nearby harbour, killing time until the trains started up again. A drunk man, around 50, stumbled out of a building and invited us into his boat. We sat a day with him drinking rum for a few hours while he regaled us with stories about all the sex parties he'd hosted on this boat. I didn't believe him, but I was warm and had a drink in hand, so I humored him. He eventually pulled a lever near the front which opened a secret door to a sex dungeon, filled with all kinds of bondage gear and sex toys. We then added each other on Facebook and my friend and I went to catch our train back to London. He would tell us about the numerous women that were half his age that would come from all over the country to attend these parties. He would also tell us that he was absolutely, unequivocally not gay, but would totally suck off the other guys in attendance because it was the polite thing to do. A pirate hero. Wow. Talk about an implication. When his next party gone be? The captain always goes down with the ship. I used to sweat blue for a few months. My clothes, nails, and phone cover all got stained blue. It went away after a while on its own, which was good because the doctors couldn't figure it out. You drank Gatorade. That's my diagnosis. Too much Nuka-Cola Quantum. I was on a train and this train had one of those chains, which you pull in case of an emergency and it stops the train. And if you pull it for no reason you can face up to 2 years in prison and a huge fine. So I was just sitting, and when I decided to get up to go to the washroom, I was kind of stuck, so I used the nearest thing to help me get up. And what I pulled was the chain. Suddenly the train stopped and I was like, oh crap, here I go to the prison. When suddenly people started running out of the train. P.S. The train had no doors. You would understand if you know what an average local Indian train looks like. I don't know about other countries. And what I realized was that a compartment of the train was on fire. So, that's how I survived from going to prison and accidentally saved the train. I told this story to a friend but he would not believe me, so I just let it go. Somebody saw you accidentally pull it and decided to save you from prison. As a former train conductor, I was so close at being mad at you for this, haha. Once really late at night at work, we were passing through a richer suburban area. I was sitting in my cub, on the same wagon as the driver but the opposite side. And I was getting up to do some rounds, lost my balance a little and accidentally leaned on the honk. I had to intercom the driver and just tell him everything was fine, I was just a klutz. But I was dead embarrassed and probably woke a few families for no reason. Don't know if you've ever been close to a train honk, but they're deafening. 10 out of 10 would not recommend. Opened the fridge and a edit jar of mustard came falling down. It hit the ground and I already thought, great, now I have to clean all of it up. But I genuinely didn't hear it hitting the ground. When I looked down, there was nothing there. No glass shards. Mustard. Nothing. Looked around for a good 5 minutes questioning my reality. Turns out it kinda repelled of the ground and landed in the wine shelf next to the fridge. Like 1.5 feet above the floor. Upright. Standing. It straight up did a bottle flip off the floor. It dropped a solid 6 feet on hard ground and just bounced. Still questioning the laws of physics to this date. Kinda reminds me about those videos where people drop light bulbs and they bounce once before they crack. Probably the same but without the cracking. This reminds me, though much less impressive, when I dropped a wine bottle in my living room onto my tile floor and the floor broke. But the bottle didn't. I still have a crack in my floor from like 2 years ago. I've had quite a few times when stuff like that happened and I caught it with my foot. Many more times though. I've kicked it across the room. Once a friend and I were really drunk in a shop buying more booze. I was holding a bottle of cider and dropped it. We both braced for it to shatter, but it freaking hit the ground. Bounced. And went right back into my hand perfectly. We just stared at each other and then laughed for probably 5 minutes straight. I honestly wouldn't have believed it if he hadn't been right there and brought it up multiple times afterward. I like watching wild birds at my work. I watched a young magpie steal bread off a raven. The magpie's family then attacked the young magpie. Took the bread off and gave it back to the raven. They were bird yelling at the young bird. Then called to the young magpie and kinda forced it to the front of the pack to the raven. The adult magpies gently pecked at the young magpie until it sung at the raven. Then the magpies all waddled away and went back to hunting for bugs. I feel like I watched some sort of family magpie discipline to prevent an interspecies bird war. Heard a bird war outside, so freaking loud. Went to go see what was happening and my dog was being attacked by birds of all kinds. She was on the side of the house and I swear to God there were pigeons, finches, brown and grey birds, I mean all kinds. She was cornered by the fence. I went to grab her and saw a dead bird behind her. I've seen her grab bird out of the sky before. She was a super high jumper and would just pluck them out of flight. Today they rebelled. They were swooping and screaming at her. Crazy as shiz. She didn't learn her lesson. Magpies are hilarious. If you ever get the chance to watch them again you should. Also, ravens are so damn smart is crazy. Are the joys of bird law. Once when I was 8 I was climbing out of the bathtub after showering. since I was wet and shiz. My mom wrapped me up in a towel so my hands were wrapped as well. I ended up tripping over the edge of the bathtub and face planted onto the ground, where I just laid there kinda comatose for a second. So I tried to get up, blood flowing down my face from a cut in my head and my nose. And my bucket of crabs nearby, this was a seaside resort, toppled over and went all over me. And they were like in a blood frenzy or something because they pinched me all over, so I started rolling on the ground. Lovely experience by the way, my family kinda just stared at me. I bled from my nose for 3 hours after being rescued from the crabs. And got sent to hospital, where my nose actually wasn't broken. My family refuses to acknowledge it ever happened even though I have a hospital bracelet with that date. Oddest thing ever. Either you were out of your mind and built a fake memory of why you were in the hospital, or your family was in shock from the blood and deleted their memories of the incident. Or they just hope you forget all of it because they're ashamed of not being able to help you with it. That's the kind of things that would make me question reality. Why was your bucket of crabs in the bathroom? I can't be the only person cackling hysterically at the mental image of an 8-year-old tightly wrapped in a towel, face down next to a bath with a bunch of crabs crawling all over them, while their family stands by watching with no expression at all. Back in high school a few years ago, I had a photography class with my best friend and we went to NYC to take pictures for an assignment. We were walking through Times Square and there's always people trying to hand out flyers or comedy club promos, bus tours, etc. This pretty girl got our attention and she was talking to us about a book. I can't remember the name. Anyway, she's explaining this book to us and suddenly she's like, I have someone who can talk to you about this book in more detail. Come with me. And she grabbed my friend and I by the arm and starts walking us somewhere down like 42 Avenue if I remember correctly. It ends up being a Scientology church. At the time I had no idea about Scientology and was just curious what heck was going on. So she walks us through the door and immediately a small group of people approaches us. She tells them we want to join and their eyes light up. One of the leaders, I guess, comes over and the girl basically hands off to him. He leads us down a hallway and says something along the lines of, "We have a special movie for you." So we're brought into a small theater, if you could call it that. Maybe like 20 chairs and a small screen. He says the video lasts about half an hour and leaves, closing the door behind him. After 2 seconds my buddy and I finally go WTF and head for the door. Turns out it's locked. We looked around the room for any other door but it was dark except for the light from the screen. I really did think we were gonna get gassed. The video was about how each of us all have untapped superpowers and this was more or less an instructional video of how to activate them. It was so absurd. When the video ended they opened the doors and asked us to fill out a contact form. Nope. We beelined it for the door and got out immediately. Headed to Midtown Comics to catch our breaths and then went about our day. I've told people before and they've been skeptical and dismissive by saying, well, why didn't you just get out immediately, or why didn't you break free from the girl, etc. IDKTBH. In the moment I didn't feel threatened or scared, I wasn't even sure what was happening because it was so sudden and quick. It wasn't until we got in the little theater that we both opened our eyes and went, dude, WTF is going on? So yeah, kidnap might be a strong word but that was my one and only brush with Scientology. Sounds about right. You should look at the Yelp reviews for the churches and buildings related to Scientology in California. There are so many stories very similar to this one. It's apparently very common. I had a similar but much more mild experience. A family friend and I went to the local Scientology orientation for fun. We turned out to be the only ones there, and it was not fun. Instead, we were essentially socially held hostage by friendly people insisting we stay and listen to their nonsense. Showed us a similar, if not the same, video. 2 hours go by and we are done being polite, we want to leave. But they desperately wanted us to follow them down a long dark hallway to the private room at the end so they could do some Dianetics thing to us. We just walked backwards to the door as they tried to cajole us to come with them. It was all very weird. Leaving out tons of details as I'm on mobile. Was crossing the border at the Golden Triangle from Thailand into Myanmar. Had a heat stroke due to dehydration and passed out in the middle of the street right after the passport control. Woke up to 5 armed soldiers pointing rifles in my face. Don't speak a word of Thai or any other Asian language. I signaled I need to drink water with my hands, and they gave me a Coca-Cola and helped me sit down in a nearby chair. It's too bad you didn't speak the language, because they were saying, "Hey, you're finally awake. You were trying to cross the border, right?" I was like 12 years old and played with my dog in the backyard. He suddenly stopped and just looked at my leg. There was a piece of wood in my leg. It was approximately 8 centimeters long and in 90 degrees angle in my leg. It didn't hurt. I didn't feel anything. To this day I'm wondering how this stick found its way into my leg. I have a friend who was pushed over her fence and fell into a bush while playing with her brother. She tried to get up, realized her leg was stuck, and looked down to see a stick pierced clean through her calf. She didn't feel it. I guess it's because of shock or whatever. My theory is that when the spinal column senses such an intense pain coming from a lower extremity, it prevents it from reaching the brain and causing you to panic and make the damage worse.